Thanks for coming, Will.
Why, thank you so much. Very happy to be here.
يعطيكم العافية جميعا. شكرا لحضوركم. First of all, super excited to have you here. This is absolutely Will Smith country. And the numbers don't lie. It's so much Will Smith country, in fact, that Bad Boys is the highest grossing film on the Saudi box office of all time. If that doesn't deserve a round of applause,
shukran.
I don't know what it is. Oh, shukran. Okay, we're going local. We're keeping it local. We're keeping it local. How you doing, Will?
Man, I am, you know, whenever I'm here, I'm always great. This, the energy and walking through here, it's cinema in Saudi. You know, I've devoted my life to cinema and the energy that is in the streets and talking to people. And, you know, we had the premiere here. So cinema is waking up in Saudi, and I am humbled and honored to be a part of it.
We are so honored to have you here and to like drink in and absorb your experience for us to cultivate an industry in the best, most organic, most authentic way.
Yes.
So once again, thank you for joining us. We had a lovely conversation backstage, and we had to say, let's stop talking backstage because we were going to run out of things to talk about. You said something very interesting backstage, and that was, when you make a movie, you make that movie 3 times.
3 times,
Can
yes.
you run me through that process?
So the concept that I've worked under for, you know, probably 2 decades is essentially you get 3 opportunities to make a movie. You make it once when you write it. So the process of writing a film, you make it 1 time. You make it a 2nd time when you shoot it. All of the actors and everybody's involved and people are making suggestions. You make it a 2nd time when you shoot it. And then you make it the 3rd time when you edit in post-production. You can change anything. You know, you can change lines, you move scenes around. So you have 3 opportunities to make a film. And there's essentially the 4 phases that, you know, my thing is, how can you guarantee a globally successful film has been the thing that I've always fought to understand. And it's the 3 phases of making it. And then the 4th phase is global promotions. But you have to be thinking about global promotions on day 1. When you start to make a film, when you start from the point of, hey, what if? When you start with the seed of the idea, you have to be thinking about promoting and how you're going to deliver it, you know, a year from whenever that point is. So, for example, I just started the process of the next film. It's called Fast and Loose, and I'm going to be working with Michael Bay. And so we started our digital team yesterday, seeding the idea of Michael and I getting back together to work again. And we already know the 6 of the top 10 global markets that most responded to the idea of Michael and I working together.
Sure.
Right? So, okay, Brazil really liked that. Japan, Tokyo, okay, got it, all right. You know, you know ahead of time, and social media is a game changer in terms of cinema. The fact that you can talk to an audience while you're making a film, you can talk to a global audience, that is an absolute game changer.
Like, on the topic of, because you and Michael Bay are reuniting, so you have enough data to know what works where. So I guess for such a young industry like ours, we're still in that data collection phase. So what could you tell us from your data collection experience as far as knowing what markets work where? Like when you premiered Bad Boys here for the first time, you were surprised at sort of the proliferation and how big that film became.
Absolutely.
So what could you tell us about sort of that process of navigating what works where? Is there a science to it, or is it just seeing what sticks?
So nobody knows, right? Okay. So you can't, you know, it's art So you can never guarantee a hit movie. What you can do is you can go 8 for 10. Sure. If there are things you can follow. You can go 8 for 10.
Work the odds. Work the odds. Yeah, I got you.
But what I would say, and what's so exciting in Saudi right now, is the energy and the spirit of young creators. There's a period where you just give them cameras.
We're in that phase.
Just let the creators go, and they will define the Saudi spirit, right? So what happens is you look around the world. There are local aesthetics, and then there are global aesthetics. So, for example, the Korean film market has tapped into the global aesthetic.
We were talking about Bollywood as well, how it's sort of, you mentioned something on that note, really, that the spirit of collaboration in filmmaking, in forming a local identity. It doesn't have to be purely local. You can collaborate with experienced professionals abroad to sort of ripen the soil for the most authentic stories you can create. Because we have, and I feel, a divide right now in understanding the difference between a Saudi film and films about Saudi. And what we want to do now is make those authentic Saudi films.
Classic, that's a classic cinematic problem. And one of the things, so if you think of African American cinema, and I would always, argue with, my African American comrades, don't make a black movie. Just make a movie and all the characters are black, right? And what happened in the early days with my career, I worked with Jerry Bruckheimer, and essentially, if you look at Bad Boys could be a black movie.
Sure.
Except we don't think about it like that. It's just a movie where the two actors happen to be black.
Absolutely.
Right? And, it's a very subtle difference, but it's the whole mindset from the beginning. The human experience is global. Everybody understands what it's like when someone you love dies.
Sure.
And it's not different in Saudi. You have different traditions around it, but the emotion of a story about someone you loved died is universally relatable. And the thing is to allow the humanity to lead, rather than for African Americans, it's like we've always felt like, it has to be pro-black.
Sure.
Well, everybody in the movie's black. It's pro-black. It's very, very pro-black.
But see, there is a fine line between, I guess, that bluntness and that nuance where, say, like a film like Get Out is, in its undertone, a film about slavery, but it's done in a way that is more nuanced. So how do you balance the responsibility of your cultural background versus the story you want to tell?
So there are subtle differences, language, for example. So on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, we worked a lot to make sure that the slang that I would use wasn't so deep into the culture that people didn't understand what it was.
Sure.
Right? So there was a little toggle. It's the flavor. So my experience growing up in West Philadelphia is the flavor that I'm bringing to the experience. But the concept of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is a universal idea. You know, we all have relatives, and the idea of a relative that was, you know, from the other side of the family moving in, right? That is a universal concept that can work and did work in a global forum, but it wasn't about being black. It was about being family. And that was the thing that was universally relatable.
Sure. And so on that same vein, I guess because you're in an industry where you sort of broke the boundary of what is possible to, what stories are possible to be told on television, like The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So in an industry that's so young like ours, backlash is inevitable. Yeah. So how do you deal if we want to take that extra step, tell that risky story, tell that story that might pinch a nerve?
Yes.
How would you navigate that? How would you navigate that backlash? And is it just a regular part? It's just a normal part of your day. The backlash is going to happen. You might as well use it to your advantage.
In general, artists always clash with the status quo. So that's a part of being an artist, that you're pushing the boundaries, you're posing questions. As much as it can be inclusive, the more people that it's inclusive of, the better it is for the messaging. But there's, you know, my father used to say, if you want to make an omelet, you're going to have to break some eggs. Yeah. You know, so it creates conversation. The goal always has to be the cultivation of connection and collaboration and conversation. And, you know, Saudi has a really unique opportunity to build bridges in a way that, you know, other film industries aren't as geographically situated to be able to tell the stories, and, you know, and just when I come here, that's the part that excites me. There's also, you know, a millennia and beyond of stories that haven't been told from this region, you know. So it is very rich and very ripe, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
We are super excited.
Yeah.
But so we had a festival scene for the longest time here, a Saudi festival scene where you had these experimental films coming out and you had these more nuanced films coming out. But now, with the Saudi box office being a legitimate part of the economy, how do I balance? We're entering a commercial market, so can you tell, I guess my question is, can you tell an authentic story while retaining its commercial value, or do you think festival films are a thing and box office films are a different thing?
So they are absolutely different animals, you know. I have worked very hard in my career to find that sweet spot in the middle where something like The Pursuit of Happiness, which is essentially
the sweet spot.
The sweet spot. The Pursuit of Happiness was in the sweet spot. It's a movie about a guy who gets a job. And that's the whole movie. Yet we were able to deliver it. Everything had to go perfectly. The music was right. The cinematography was right. The casting was right. And it hit that sweet spot in the movie where it just burst the human spirit. If you're a parent and you sit and you watch that scene in The Pursuit of Happiness.
The subway scene, and you don't cry.
Yes, the subway scene. It's like that touches the human heart. And generally, if you can find non-dialogue ways, they translate more globally. So
Show, don't
in
tell.
The Pursuit of Happiness, in that scene, if you remember, it's just the banging on the door, and you hear the banging on the door, and it's the moment when the character just puts his foot over. It's non-dialogue, so everybody gets it. As soon as people have to read a subtitle or translate, there's a little bit of disconnect that happens. So I'm always looking in terms of action, in terms of comedy, and in terms of the delivery of emotion, finding the non-dialogue way to deliver the most critical parts.
And you think that non-dialogue way is the way to sort of mass appeal? Because we also look for, we've had, the last 2 years have been very successful as far as Saudi commercial films have been concerned. And it's not that we have the formula yet, but the common denominator between all of them is a global story told on a local scale. So it's just these people happen to be in Saudi. It's not that, it's not that. So my next question would be, you brought up The Pursuit of Happiness. So in films like Concussion, Ali, The Pursuit of Happiness, you are portraying real people. You are portraying like true stories. How is it different for you to jump into those characters? Is there more pressure? Is there a heightened process to getting into those? Is there a sense of responsibility where I need to do this character justice, otherwise the scrutiny will be doubled?
Yes, it's really scary. And, you know, for example, you know, when I said yes to make Ali, so I'm making a film about Muhammad Ali, and it never dawned on me that one day I was going to be sitting in a movie theater with Muhammad Ali watching a movie. And it is a huge responsibility when you're telling a story about a person who lived, and even more so if the person is still alive. You know, so that's also a way that when the movie starts with based on a true story, that's also another global hook. When it says based on a true story, people open to that idea for whatever reason more than fictional stories. So you know, I was excited of with His Royal Highness was speaking about films that I haven't seen yet that I want to see. I was taking notes over there. It's like what happens with historical stories like that, you tell them for every generation.
Sure.
So you remake the film every 15 to 20 years for the next generation, and it becomes something. If you look that, Walt Disney made he had his 10 stories, and then you tell them over and over, and you retell them for every generation.
You're just reviving history.
You revive the history for every generation.
So when it comes to Ali, Concussion, Bad Boys, Independence Day, all, like, especially off of the success of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, as this actor that sort of broke that ceiling, how do you avoid after that, off of that momentum where they think Will's the only character this guy can play? So let's keep typecasting him in that role. So what's the process of you picking your roles or navigating the waters where I kind of need the money?
I know, yeah.
Yeah. So how do you navigate those waters?
So I think the concept of typecasting is a good start, right? So if you can be typecasted, that just means there's something you do that people like. So that's a good thing. It only becomes a bad thing when you're typecasted and then they don't like it anymore and you're still trying to do it, right? So there's a point of transition also that you hit. So, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was essentially me. I based it on myself and my friends from growing up in Philly. So it was things I knew. And then we talked about, I did a film called 6 Degrees of Separation, which was as big a departure as I had ever made. And I just think that's a part of it. You know, back to the previous question of the idea of the different types of films. You want to do it all.
Sure.
You want to do it all, but there are films that are just fun and enjoyable and people go and have a good time. And then there are films where, the audience, you'll make them work a little bit more,
Sure.
to go. And there's a little more of a connection to a deeper idea that might be a little less comfortable. And those tend to make a little bit less money too,
Yeah.
But they last longer.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess that was what I was asking. How do you balance between the saying says one for you, one for the studio.
Yeah.
So when did you, after in the post Fresh Prince of Bel-Air era, realize that I can do more? I want to do more. And how did you go about doing more?
Well, yeah, everyone on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was a stage-trained actor. I was the least experienced person on the Fresh Prince. So, Joseph Marcel would, during the summer, he would go and be on stage doing Shakespeare, and James Avery would be doing an August Wilson play. So everybody would leave the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and go to the stage. And I would leave and go to music, right? So in watching how they developed and cultivated their talent as actors, that was something that was critically important for me. And I've always wanted to make things that the world could enjoy. So in the science of what I was trying to create with music, with movies, I always wanted to do things that were globally relevant.
And when I guess off of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, when did it start where you're like, no, I want to do something? You jumped into music for a while, and then what role did you get where you were like, yes, this is the one. This is the one that's going to put me on the map as a great actor. And what made you, did you know it at the time? Or was it just, oh, this blew up?
No, I think Ali was the film where I knew I had to prove myself and I had to push myself. I trained for a year and a half. Physical training, dialect training, understanding the era. It's a period piece where I had to fight like the greatest fighter of all time, and it was a grueling process of building my body and building my mind, but I knew that Ali was the one that if I could do that, I felt confident that I could transition fully into a respected actor.
Sure. So on the topic of transitioning into those roles, you said something that I don't think I never thought I'd hear, which was type casting is sometimes a good thing. So you can milk that cow for a bit, and then, so how do you know when it starts to go down? How do you know? Do you feel it? Or is it a more instinctual, or like, I don't want to do this anymore kind of thing?
Yeah, I think for me, there's an axiom. They say, write what you know, right? So you definitely want to start creating with what you know, the thing you know fully. As an actor, Pursuit of Happiness, for example, I was doing my father. So I was using my father's body movements and how he would use his hand and his shoulders and how his neck was, So I was basing it on a character that I knew. And then I met Chris Gardner and started to, work a little bit with the blend. But going with what you know is first and foremost.
Sure.
And I would say for young Saudi artists, just, tell the truth. Just start with what do you know, what's the truth? And let that be the seeds that blossom into the cinematic identity.
So when it comes to biopics,
Yep.
there's an Ali in which you completely embodied that character versus Cuba Gooding as OJ, who embodied like kind of the spirit of OJ,
spirit,
but
right.
not even though that is a very like distinct character with a distinct voice. So when do you make that artistic decision that I'm going to embody the spirit of this character like a Chris
Right.
Gardner versus I'm going to embody this character fully like an Ali?
Yeah. And generally, for me, it is how recognizable is the person to the audience. So if the people sitting in the theater, if the person is as recognizable as, Muhammad Ali, or as recognizable as Richard Williams. So, in King Richard, I knew people had a sense of how his voice sounded. They had a visual of his body, so I knew I had to get really close. And there's a spot where once the audience is in, then you can expand a little bit. But you get the first time they see you, they have to be in. That first.
You can't lose them on that first scene
that
because
first
if you lose
5
them,
minutes,
there's no winning them back. No.
They don't come back.
So early on in your career, when it came to auditioning and the culture of auditioning, a lot of the time I'd like to tell the actors here, and myself included, is that we are in the business of no. Like rejection is part of the process, and all you need is that one yes, and once you get that one yes, you run with it.
Yeah.
So when did you feel like you weren't being taken seriously as an actor when it came to those auditions for those serious roles where they're like, why is Will here? Will's the comedian.
Yeah.
So how do you change those minds when you walk into, what are, I guess the easiest question would be, what are your audition tips for when you walk into that room and the spotlight's on you?
I think the big thing for auditioning is don't try to get the job. Like, you're not going to an audition to get the job. It's like, almost nobody is getting the job. One person, right? So when you walk into an audition, you're going to meet the people. You need to know all the casting agents. You're going to see the other actors, and you're going to work out. So to me, auditions have to be the gym. You have to do it every day like you're just going, and you're doing it as a workout. You're trying things. You're experimenting. What has happened that's even more difficult for auditions now is, 80% of auditions are self-tape.
I can't do that. That's
self-tape is
so
terrible.
Disconnected.
Yeah.
It's so disconnected.
So it really is. You have to live it. It has to be your life. It has to be what you're going to do, whether you get paid or not. And then you find a way to get paid through your mastery.
I think the best rejection I've ever received at an audition in LA was the casting guy looked at me and said, "You're not good for this role, but you're advantageously ethnically ambiguous." Like, okay,
Wow.
so that's a no.
You're like,
I'm like,
thank you.
so you don't call me, I'll call you.
Yeah.
But that's something you could also play to your advantage. It's like in Concussion, where you're playing a character that is not an American. So then we move on to another thing, where it comes to embodying people that have not necessarily shared your life experience, or that have not lived your experience. So do you feel like an actor is an actor, and he should step into whatever shoes he can dutifully fill, not just for the sake of filling them, but do you think that is something more actors should be embracing and not being afraid of, oh, you should give it to this person or you should give it to that person?
So there's a difference between an actor and a movie star. A movie star is a completely different animal. In terms of being an actor, you do whatever's in front of you. That you embody what the role calls for, and you don't question should you be doing that or not. As an actor, it's you're playing a snake, then you figure out how to play a snake, and you don't add those questions. As a movie star, part of what a movie star is doing is cultivating a specific global relationship, So a movie star, you're taking the audience into consideration and you're delivering on your relationship. A movie star is looking at the whole of the project. A movie star is trying to get his fans or her fans into the seats in the movie theater at the end of this
More
process.
of a numbers game than an artistic game.
Yeah, movie star is a more holistic view of the business, but in terms of just being an actor, you're more in your silo.
Sure. I'm getting the time wave of death, so
right.
I'm just going to I'm going to close it up. I'm going to close it up by just, if you could give one piece of advice to young Saudi professionals, not necessarily actors, directors, writers, producers, everyone, if you could give them one piece of advice that you wish you knew back then, what would it be? No pressure.
No, right. Yeah. Well, I would say you are at an unprecedented point in Saudi history, and you are at really an unprecedented point for filmmakers in the history of cinema. This is a unique and rare opportunity where the world is waiting to see what you do and waiting to hear what you say. I would say take it seriously. You have the resources, you have the support, you have the history, and the time is now to deliver to the world in a way. If you think of someone like Bruce Lee, you know, Bruce Lee was all I knew of China when I was 10 years old. Bruce Lee introduced me to Chinese culture, and I wanted to be like Bruce Lee, you know. And so I would say, you know, who is willing to step up, who is going to step up and be the person that carries the culture to the world. And I would say it is beautiful, and seize this opportunity.
Will, thank you so much. Tahiyya al-Ustad Will Smith. Thank you so much, Will. Thank you so much.
Thank you.